Hello and welcome to our kitchen. My name is Katie and I am a dietetic intern with Seattle Pacific University, and I am here with the Lynnwood Food Bank to bring you some recipes and nutrition tips. Today we're going to be doing a simple Spanish rice. This is an easy way to flavor rice that can be used in tacos or burritos. Could be used as a side dish. You could add vegetables and beans and make it a main. So let's get started by going over what ingredients we'll need for this recipe. You will need 1 medium yellow onion, 2 cloves of garlic. Spices, we have some paprika, some chili powder, cumin, salt and pepper. I have here some canola oil. You could also use vegetable oil. These are unsaturated fats, which are a heart-healthy option, as opposed to a saturated fat, but you could use saturated fat like butter, lard, or ghee. I have here 1 3/4 cups of chicken broth. This option is a low sodium option. If you're watching your salt for a heart-healthy diet, you could also use water if you want to omit the salt completely. Canned items, we have some fire-roasted diced tomatoes, and we have some diced green chilies. I have here 1 cup of long grain rice, and that does it for our ingredients. Kitchen equipment, we'll need a cutting board, a chef's knife, a spoon for stirring, some measuring utensils. So I have a tablespoon, teaspoon, and a 1/2 teaspoon. I also have the liquid measuring cup that you see our broth in. I'm using here an electric skillet. You could use a regular skillet over a burner. You could also make this in a crock pot or an instant pot at home. So it's a really easy thing to make as long as you have an electrical connection. And I also have a stirring utensil for the skillet. So first I'm going to start by chopping our onion. I've already chopped most of it here. So we see nice square pieces. And once you have taken off both ends and removed the skin, I have 1/2 of the onion here. I'm going to slice vertically and then slice horizontally to make approximately 1 centimeter sized cubes. Alright, I'm just gonna spin this 90 degrees and then continue chopping this way. Alright, so now we have the rest of our onion chopped. I'm going to begin our cooking process by adding 2 tablespoons of our canola oil to our skillet. Tablespoon here, 1, 2 tablespoons. We're going to let that heat up for just a moment, and we're going to begin by adding our rice directly to the oil. What's that going to do? It's going to coat the rice with a little bit of fat, and it's going to start a caramelization process that brings out a little bit more flavor in the rice. We have here a long grain white rice. And before adding it to this bowl, I rinsed it about 5 or 6 times by adding clean water, shaking it around, and draining that water off. You want to do that until the water runs clear, and the milkiness you're seeing is a starch that is coating the outside of the white rice. The reason we want to remove that starch is removing it will prevent the rice from sticking together and possibly scorching on the bottom of the pan. I also wanted to mention that you can use a brown rice or really any whole grain rice for this recipe. What is the difference between a whole grain and white rice? Well, a whole grain piece of rice has 3 components. It has an outer layer, which is called the bran. It has an inner layer called the endosperm. It has a small layer in that called the germ. By milling the rice, the outer bran and the germ are removed and leaving just the endosperm, which is the starchy, heavy carbohydrate layer. The bran and the germ are really high in fiber, which kind of slows down your digestion. It also is really healthy for gut health and also really high in B vitamins. This rice is an enriched rice, and what that means is that after processing, they've added synthetically some of those vitamins back into the mix. If you want to use a brown rice, it is higher in fiber and B vitamins, but also it will take longer to cook and is less absorbent of other flavors. White rice will cook faster, it absorbs faster, it is higher in glucose index, so it is going to spike your blood sugar a little bit more if you're thinking about that. But also it's faster and easier to cook and absorbs more flavor. So let's get started. I think our oil might be heated up. Okay, I'm going to use the spoon to scoop this out. The rice in the pan seems like it's not quite hot yet, but I'm going to take this opportunity to stir it around and coat all of the rice with the oil. So the onion you saw me chop, but here next to it we have our minced garlic. And adding both onion and garlic, they're both aromatics, so they add lots of flavor to any dish that you're preparing. The reason that I pre-minced the garlic is that when you're mincing it up, it breaks down cell walls, and it also breaks down some enzymes that are stored in those cells, exposing them to the oxygen in the open air. And what that does is it triggers a compound in garlic called allicin to be developed. And allicin is really great for heart health. So if you're adding freshly minced garlic to a dish, be sure to mince it at least 5 to 10 minutes before you're going to be adding it to the heat source, and that way you'll get the most of those heart healthy benefits. Next, we're going to be adding our onion, our garlic, and our spices. So first, I have here chopped 1 medium yellow onion. Toss that right into our skillet with the rice. We're going to want to cook this with the garlic and the spices for about 5 minutes until the onion starts to turn a translucent color. So I have our 1 onion in there. I have chopped 2 cloves of garlic, minced garlic. And it's been sitting for about 5 to 10 minutes, like we described earlier, why that's heart healthy way to let the garlic sit. Here I've pre-measured out our spices. This cup contains 2 teaspoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, a half teaspoon of paprika, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to sprinkle this over our onion, garlic, and rice mixture. Heating up the spices is going to help to release the oils that are still contained in dried spices and really bring out the flavor. Right. So let that saute for a few minutes. While that's cooking, I wanted to go over a couple of low sodium substitutions. If you want to make this flavorful rice dish at home, but are considering your sodium intake for the day for heart healthy reasons, A couple of things you can make easy swaps for. One, we have this chicken broth. This could either be a low sodium broth, it could also be a vegetable broth, or you could substitute water. Okay, another option for lower sodium is what you choose to use for your diced tomatoes in a can. These are full of sodium, which adds a lot of flavor, but it's easy to replace these with either a low sodium diced tomato, or you could even use fresh tomato. The green chilies is another option of something that you could use a fresh diced chili for. Something like a jalapeno or a poblano pepper is not going to have the added sodium that a canned diced chili like this one has. And of course, lastly, the salt that we just added from this cup of spices. To replace these flavors, by taking out that sodium, you can add different spices. Things like dried onion powder, garlic powder, more chili powder and cumin. Those are going to add more flavor without the salt. So next we'll be adding either our broth or our water. For the 1 cup of rice, we'll be using 1 3/4 cups of broth or water. For the white rice, if you're using a whole grain rice, you will probably need at least 2 cups of liquid for 1 cup of rice. I'm going to pour this in. Next, I'm going to add 1 can of diced tomatoes. This is about 14 ounces. And these already have a lot of flavor and seasoning in them. It's going to really shine through in our final dish. And I have 1 4-ounce can of green chilies. So I'm going to add the whole can, chilies, and that liquid has lots of flavor. We mix all this together in our pan. Since we just added all those liquid ingredients that were room temperature, you can see just from the simmer that this whole mixture has been reduced in temperature. So I'm going to turn up the heat slightly. If you were working on a stove, this is where you might go from a medium to a medium-high heat. I want to bring this mixture back to a simmer where you see small bubbles around the edges of the pan. Then we're going to cover it, reduce the heat, and allow it to simmer for about 25 to 30 minutes. It's well mixed together. Starting to see some small bubbles forming around the edges of the skillet. So I'm going to reduce the heat to a low heat, and I'm going to cover our mixture. Keep an eye on it, but you'll want to keep the lid on the skillet the entire time because that helps to retain all of that moisture, the water that's evaporating, helps to keep it inside of the pan because we don't want to lose any of that. So I'm going to allow this to simmer for about 20 to 35 minutes, and then we will check back in with our final product. Welcome back. We have had our Spanish rice simmering covered for about 30 minutes, and all of that water, except for what's on the lid here, has been absorbed into our rice. So you don't see any kind of standing liquid. Everything has been fully absorbed into the rice, along with all of that tomato and spice flavor. The rice is nice and fluffy and soft, and this is ready to be served. So again, serving suggestions would be things like tacos, enchiladas, burritos. You could also serve this on the side with some steamed vegetables and some kind of protein like beans or a meat protein. So I'm going to turn this off and serve it up. I hope that you enjoy this recipe, and I hope that you join us for future recipes. Thanks for tuning in.